here in South Florida. The White House Legislative Director Mark Short telling Chris Wallace that the president has invited the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, House Speaker Paul Ryan, to Camp David the first weekend in January to discuss their legislative priorities, which also includes infrastructure. It was a main part of the president's proposal when he wanted to be president. Now that he is, the House and Senate haven't really acted on that plan, spending perhaps hundreds of billions, if not $1 trillion on infrastructure. What is unclear is how exactly that is going to be structured, how much the federal government is going to spend, how much state and local governments are going to spend, and where that money is going to come from, in particular with a $20 trillion deficit. On top of all that, the Congress has to address spending on disaster relief, immigration, and a host of other items, including budgeting and the debt ceiling, all to start 2018. Back to you.
All right, Frank Judson, thank you. John.
Well, health care is just one of the many contentious issues on President Trump's agenda, many of them putting Republicans and Democrats at odds. But the hope, of course, is that lawmakers find common ground. Will they be able to do it? I'm joined now by Hugo Gurdon, editorial director for the Washington Examiner. We are told, Hugo, that one of the things the president wants to accomplish this time around, in 2018, is a big infrastructure bill. That is generally something the Democrats find pretty palatable. Is that likely to be the big achievement of this legislative session?
Whether it's an achievement, I'm not sure, but it's certainly something that they're going to focus on. I mean, as you just heard, the president is going to meet with Speaker Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell at Camp David to hash out what the agenda will be. And I think the president has made it pretty plain that infrastructure is going to be top of the list. Now, as you say, the Democrats, they really favor infrastructure spending. So this may be an opportunity for the Democrats, who are going to hammer President Trump and the Republicans on everything else, to show that they are not just the party of no. They want infrastructure spending. So perhaps they can go into the 2018 election showing that they've cooperated on at least one thing and say this means that they are not just obstructionists. So conceivably, infrastructure is something that will get done.
But is there anything else on the horizon that both parties can agree on?
No, I don't think so. I think that on health care, even though the president may be right that in the long term the repeal of the mandate unravels Obamacare, in fact, the Republicans have given the Democrats an extra weapon to go into 2018 with and towards the midterms, because the repeal of the mandate is going to push up premium costs even more sharply for those who still buy their health care through the Obamacare exchanges. So, I think that the Democratic base is very fired up. They really oppose President Trump. The Democrats know that historically, in the first midterm elections after the election of a new president, the president's party generally loses seats. So they really believe that they've got a big Democratic wave coming. The last thing they're going to do is try and make the Republicans and the president look good. They're going to oppose him at every point on every policy, with the possible exception of infrastructure.
But that's pretty much been the playbook for, the first year of his term. Democrat opposition to pretty much everything the president has wanted to do, and he has still managed to get a few big things across the finish line.
Well, he certainly has. Now, I mean, they would say that the playbook was working pretty well up until about the end of November, or a little bit earlier than that. Then suddenly, in the end of November and into December, the Republicans, and the president in particular, got onto a roll. The big tax reform package, which was signed just before Christmas, was obviously the biggest thing, but there was enormous amount of deregulation. And the net neutrality was repealed, or it's now at death's door. So I think that the president is entering 2018 on a roll, and the Republicans are feeling fairly strong too, because one of the things that happened was that in the House, the leadership finally got the Republican conference to unite. They weren't being tripped up from those on their left. They weren't being tripped up by those on their right. And when they united, they were able to completely ignore the demands of the Democrats for legislation, for example, on Dreamer immigration, and they passed the tax reform bill without any Democratic votes. The real problem is going to be in the Senate, where it was hard enough for Mitch McConnell to get things done and to move the agenda forward when he had a 52-48 advantage. Yeah. Now, Doug Jones is going to be seated as the senator from Alabama, and that means that the margin is only going to be 49 to 51, and that's going to make things even harder for Mitch McConnell. There's plenty of Republican senators who would not go along with him on health care, on Obamacare repeal and replace. Now it's going to be even harder.
But then again, I remember way back to the 2016 elections when a lot of the experts were predicting there would be a Democrat majority in the U.S. Senate. So Mitch McConnell has to be happy about that. In terms of, there's not likely to be any big sea change in terms of the two parties working together, right? I mean, this health care repeal or the individual mandate repeal and the budget passed very much along party lines, pretty much in the House and the Senate.
No, absolutely. I think that you can expect, with the 2018 elections coming and with the Democrats really feeling they have an opportunity to take the House, I mean, they have a pretty strong opportunity for doing that. History suggests it, and also the president's personal unpopularity suggests it too. But one of the things they're going to be worried about all the way is, even though the tax package is currently unpopular, and the Republicans have done a terrible job in getting the message out that this is actually going to benefit 90% of the middle class, you know, it's very unpopular. And you know, one of the things that the Democrats are going to be hoping for is that this does not turbocharge the economy and make things look up and up on the way into the 2018 election and perhaps prevent them from winning the House. They've got a much, much tougher job to win the Senate because they're defending more than twice as many seats as the Republicans are defending. So, you know, the most likely result is probably going to be they may take the House, but they'll find it tough to take the Senate. Well,
if a lot of people see their federal withholding go down from their paychecks this in the coming
we're a very, very long way from the election, and so, you know, it's foolish of me to actually make a prediction there. So don't hold me to it.
Well, we're happy to hear you going out on a limb at any rate. Hugo Gurdon from the Washington Times. Thanks,
John. Thanks, John.
A mother and her 2 children shot dead and a police officer injured in a series of shootings yesterday at a Phoenix apartment complex. Police are clearing the area after finding the woman dead outside.
We went around the block to try from the other side, and every entrance was just blocked off by tons of cop cars, and then we saw some police like holding guns and rifles. We've never seen anything like this before. Like, all of our neighbors seem really normal and nice, and we've never had a problem with anybody here.
Well, the suspect barricaded inside an apartment for several hours. He was finally taken into custody after a brief exchange of gunfire. Officers finding the bodies of a 10-month-old and an 11-year-old inside. The suspect uninjured. One officer was wounded by shrapnel.
A hometown paper's blistering rebuke for Orrin Hatch, one of the Senate's longest-serving members. His response and what this is all about is ahead. Plus, new developments when it comes to North Korea as tensions mount over the rogue nation's nuke. Whether 2018 will likely bring peace or war.
The White House supports diplomatic talks. The observation that's being made, and I would agree with the observation, is we're waiting on North Korea to come to that conclusion. And until they do, the pressure campaign will only intensify.
Some Western politics for you now. A Utah newspaper calling on Senator Orrin Hatch to retire. The Salt Lake Tribune's editorial board attacking the Republican senator for appearing to get ready to run for another term after saying his 2012 campaign would be his last. The op-ed reads, once again, Hatch has moved to freeze the field, to make it nigh unto impossible for any number of would-be senators to so much as mount a credible challenge. That's not only not fair to all of those who were passed over, it is basically a theft from the Utah electorate. It would be good for Utah if Hatch, having finally caught the great white whale of tax reform, were to call it a career. If he doesn't, the voters should end it for him. Senator Hatch responding on Twitter, grateful for this great Christmas honor from the Salt Lake Tribune. For the record, I voted for Spencer J. Cox and Rudy Gobert. There have been reports Hatch could retire to make room for Mitt Romney to fill his seat. A spokesman for Hatch says that is not true.
Dealing with North Korea now after a weekend of more rhetoric from the rogue nation over new sanctions, Russia is actually offering to broker talks between the U.S. and the North. This, as South Korea predicts, it is and its northern neighbor will look to open talks next year. The top Democrat on Senate Foreign Relations believes there is an opening for diplomacy. Listen.
There are pretty strong additional sanctions to be imposed against North Korea because of their continued testing of ballistic missiles. So that is absolutely, it was a strong move forward. It was great to see China and Russia join us in that. It now needs to be followed up with diplomacy, where we get China and the United States working with the same strategy with North Korea to find a way that we can ease the tension and get North Korea to change directions.
Patrick Granfield served as a speechwriter for Defense Secretary Ash Carter and Secretary of State John Kerry. He's currently an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. Thank you very much for talking to us. I always say talk is cheap, so I want to see action. And, you know, when it comes to talks, Rex Tillerson, he has come forward. He said that he wants to actually try to open up a dialogue with North Korea. But it's interesting because he and President Trump are sort of on again, off again when it comes to an agreement between the U.S. and North Korea and wanting diplomatic talks with Pyongyang. Is that even possible now after a weekend of more dangerous rhetoric from North Korea?
Well, Julie, there's an old saying in diplomacy that diplomacy without force is like a symphony without instruments. And I think in order to have diplomacy work, you do need to have a credible threat of force. And even though we're in the season of hope and joy and peace, I think we do really need to think seriously, think hard about the prospect of what a military confrontation, of what military actions against North Korea would entail in 2018. And this is difficult because ever since North Korea got a nuclear capability back in 2006, in the Bush administration, there's really been a lack of clarity about what the options are and about what we have to do. That means war feeds on itself. And we don't know exactly what a war will cost, what its ramifications will be. But we do know that diplomacy, deterrence, backed up by a credible threat of force, has worked in the past. And that's what we should continue to pursue in 2018.
Unfortunately, though, it hasn't worked with North Korea. I mean, and, you know, I want to know where you stand with the Kremlin even offering to broker talks between Pyongyang and the U.S. I mean, how is that going to go?
Well, I think, Julie, you're right. I hear some skepticism in your voice there, and I think believing that Putin would be an honest broker of this is believing that the New York Giants would have a good chance at the Super Bowl this year.
That's sad.
I think that's
as
not
a Giants fan, but it is reality.
It's true.
And
it's
I'm
the
willing
reality.
to accept it.
I think we need to work with the Chinese. We need to work with the Japanese. We need to work with the South Koreans to be in lockstep. And also, we need to be tough on Russia. Before Russia can be an honest broker, before they can sit down and broker a peace, we need to look at what they're doing to aid North Korea. They've laundered North Korean money. They've helped their missile program. So in a sense, being tough on North Korea means being tough on Russia. And that's something that President Trump will have to do in 2018.
I think he's sent a pretty strong message to Russia. You know, let's talk South Korea, because today South Korea has even predicted that the North will look to open talks with them next year. Can South Korea even trust North Korea after all the direct threats coming in the form of missile test firing over the years? I mean, I just don't know what can be trusted here.
No, Julia, I think you're right. And I think the South Koreans, we need them to be in lockstep with us, and we need to be in lockstep with them. And that means continuing our training exercises, continuing to work with the great men and women of PACOM, our military in the Pacific Theater, and making sure that we are prepared. You know, they have a slogan out there, and I've seen them train on the Korean Peninsula, and the slogan is "Fight Tonight." And while nobody wants to see a fight tonight, we need to be prepared, we need to be ready, and in order to be ready, in order to be prepared, we need to have legitimacy of the international community and a full diplomatic, full press over the next few months and into the next year.
I don't want to be the one to expose our weaknesses here, but we're not ready. I mean, we're not. I mean, our THAAD system's not ready. Our missile defense program is not ready. And we have troops based in South Korea. North Korea doesn't want U.S. troops based in South Korea. I mean, what is the military's role if these talks ever actually do take place?
Well, you heard the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Neller, one of the greatest leaders and Marines of his generation, say just in the past week that, yes, we need to be prepared for a big blank war, and that our soldiers really need to ramp up their preparations. But at the same time, again, we need our diplomats and our military professionals working in tandem, and we need to support them wholeheartedly so that that threat can be as credible as possible, and we can defuse this crisis peacefully in 2018. Let's
hope so. Patrick Granfield, thank you so much.
Thank you.
John.
Well, remember the massive mix-up on live TV?
La La Land.
This moment, seen by millions around the world watching the Oscars, We have a look back at some of the biggest mistakes and scandals of 2017. And a jetliner slipping and sliding off the runway as snowy weather makes for a scary landing. Plus, President Trump's legal team predicting a rapid conclusion to the Russia investigation.
The winter weather causing a scary situation at Boston's Logan Airport. A JetBlue flight from Savannah, Georgia, skidding off the taxiway shortly after landing at around 7:15 last night. No injuries were reported, thankfully, but passengers were bussed to the terminal, shaken up, of course, after getting safely off that plane. Airport authorities say snow did force them to close runways yesterday morning, but all was clear by 11:30 last night.
United Airlines now apologizing and offering a $500 travel voucher after a passenger accused the airline of giving her first-class seat to Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, telling the woman her reservation had been canceled, then giving her a seat in Economy Plus. The flight was from Houston to Washington. United says it upgraded Jackson Lee automatically and not because she's a member of Congress. The Congresswoman in a statement says that she did not ask for anything exceptional or out of the ordinary.
Well, the wrong Best Picture almost takes home the Oscar, and a number of celebrities and politicians are hit with sexual assault allegations. 2017 was a year filled with scandals in Hollywood and Washington, D.C. Fox News anchor Ainsley Earhart takes a look back.
La La Land.
An epic blunder at the Oscars when La La Land eclipsed Moonlight as Best Picture. But moments later...
I'm sorry. No, there's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
The mix-up was corrected in the middle of La La Land's acceptance speech, with the cast and crew of Moonlight going on to accept the award. Kathy Griffin creating a bloody mess after a photo shoot of her surfaced with her holding a mask of President Trump's bloody head. The comedian initially said that she was sorry, but then later revoked that apology. Yes! United Airlines faced a public relations nightmare in April. Video shows 2 security officers violently dragging a passenger off the plane when the passenger refused to give up his seat to an airline crew member. The CEO of the company, Oscar Munoz, issued a public apology for the incident. You might want to call him Pill Cosby. The legendary actor is accused of drugging Andrea Constand before he performed sexual acts in 2004. Cosby denies the charges, and a judge declared a mistrial after jurors failed to reach a verdict. The new trial is set to begin in the spring. Dove also coming under fire for what some called a racially insensitive commercial. The ad featured a black woman removing her shirt to reveal a white woman. The soap company saying it missed the mark in thoughtfully representing women of color. Dozens of women come forward accusing director Harvey Weinstein of harassment, assault, and even rape. The movie mogul was dismissed from the Weinstein Company and expelled from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, in addition to several open investigations by authorities. Weinstein denies the allegations. The Weinstein story creating a ripple effect, with dozens of men accused, including Kevin Spacey, Louis C.K., Jeffrey Tambor, Ben Affleck, Dustin Hoffman, Nick Carter, Sylvester Stallone, and former President George H.W. Bush.
As I'm sure you can imagine, we are devastated.
Today's show anchor Matt Lauer terminated from NBC after an employee filed a complaint about inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. NBC News chairman Andrew Lack said it was the first complaint lodged against Lauer, but the network has reason to believe it was not an isolated incident. Journalist Charlie Rose was fired from CBS, and his prominent interview show was dropped by Bloomberg and PBS after several women accused the former CBS This Morning host of harassment, including groping and lewd phone calls. Harassment allegations shaking up Washington as well. Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore accused of dating and in some instances sexually assaulting teenage girls when he was in his 30s. He denies all of the allegations.
The people of Alabama had more in common than to divide us.
Moore ended up losing the seat in the December 12th election against Democrat Doug Jones. Democratic Senator Al Franken, shown in this photo, placing his hands over Leanne Tweeden in 2006. Several other women accused the senator of touching them inappropriately at campaign events. After mounting pressure, the senator resigned. This just days after Democrat John Conyers, facing his own allegations, announced his retirement. With 2018 right around the corner, no doubt there will be more of these scandals in the news, and we'll be covering it all for you right here. In New York, Ainsley Earhart, Fox News.
Well, it's been devastating California for nearly a month, and it's already the biggest wildfire in state history. The toll the Thomas Fire has taken, as firefighters say they could be weeks from containing this blaze. Plus, despite winning big on tax reform, why Republicans may be wary of their 2018 chances, the warning signs, our political panel debates.
I think there's still a lot of confusion about what's actually in the bill. There's a lot of good policy in the tax bill. We'll see. We'll see if that translates into any political support. But I would just tell you that this is going to be a tough year, 2018, for my party.
Let's turn to politics now, and the Democrats are bullish on their chances in 2018, thinking recent election victories signal a blue wave that could help them retake the House of Representatives in next year's midterms. And with the GOP holding just a one-seat edge in the Senate, Dems are not counting out retaking that chamber as well. Bernie Sanders on why Democrats are hopeful heading into the new year.
I think what you're seeing is a referendum on Donald Trump, about a man who said one thing during the campaign and his actions are very, very different. What we're seeing in Alabama, what we're seeing in Virginia, New Jersey, and in states all across this country are large voter turnouts where people standing up and fighting back and demanding that we have a government that represents all of us, not just the 1%. If I were the Republicans, I would worry very much about 2018.
Let's bring in our political panel. Democratic strategist Jessica Tarlov is with us. GOP strategist Lisa Booth is with us as well.
Hi,
both
John.
of them Fox News contributors.
Hey.
Hi to both of you.
Yeah.
Jessica, to you first. From the Republican standpoint, how worried are you about losing one or maybe both houses of Congress?
I think I'm really worried about losing the House. I think I'm less worried about losing the Senate. I agree with a lot of what Bernie Sanders said there in terms of this being a very high turnout, enthused Democratic base right now, especially focusing on the African-American vote, which is what delivered the win in Alabama for us, though I know that those were extenuating circumstances and we're not going to get an accused child molester every time.
The African-American vote tends not to turn out, though, in non-presidential election years.
Right. Well, that's why the special elections have been so important there, and to make sure that we continue to cultivate that turnout. I take your point completely, and obviously when you're showing up to elect the first African-American president, that's going to be a larger turnout than for a Hillary Clinton, for instance, but we need to continue to cultivate that enthusiasm going forward, and I think we're in good position in the House. But at the Senate, we're defending, I think, 25 seats, 10 in deep red states that went for Trump. So I'm not so hopeful about that. But the House ain't bad.
Yeah, Lisa, typically in off-year elections, the party that controls the White House does lose a bunch of seats, and it tends to go in line with the president's popularity polls. This president's popularity polls at this moment are not all that great. What do you think the chances are?
Well, I actually agree with a lot of what Jessica said, surprisingly. But, of course, Republicans have the House and the Senate and the White House. So, Republicans could face some losses heading into the 2018 midterm elections. I'm a little bit more worried about the House than I am than the Senate for the reasons that Jessica laid out. I mean, look at the Senate map for Republicans. Democrats are defending 25 seats. I think Republicans are defending 8, if my memory serves me correct. And if you're Republicans, you're only defending one state that Hillary Clinton won, and that's the state of Nevada, where Democrats are defending 10 Senate states where President Trump won, 5 of which he won by double digits. So I think the Senate is much more difficult. Look, I've worked on campaigns during 2-wave elections, 2010, 2014. I think it's a little too early to really tell and read the tea leaves. But, for the reasons both Jessica and I outlined, I do think there should be some concern for Republicans.
But that's what we like to do this time of year. We're about to turn the calendar page to a new year. We like to read the tea leaves. Jessica, most elections revolve around the economy. Democrats, I mean, Nancy Pelosi famously said this tax reform bill is an abomination. What did she call it?
Armageddon,
Armageddon, there you go.
You didn't notice the end of the world?
Right, it hasn't come yet.
We're still alive.
We'll be here to cover it if it comes. But listen, What if this economy takes off under this tax bill? Is that going to be a problem for Democrats, Jessica?
Depending what they say about it. I think if the Democrats come out there and the American public is feeling more and more optimistic, they have higher wages, they have more money in their pockets, and Democrats are coming out there and just railing with the same tired talking points of this is all about the 1%, we're not going to get anywhere. I think the Democrats need to be very careful about their messaging on this, to talk about the disparity and what the upper class is getting versus the middle and lower class, that these cuts will not continue in perpetuity, what kind of breaks were hidden in this that benefit those that are not the base of our party. But I think that we need to be very understanding about that and get our own wins here. Lisa and I have been talking a lot about the potential for a bill to get protections for our dreamers, 800,000 of them. We can do something on infrastructure, and that's a win for both parties. I think, you know, when you look at the generic ballot, and we're up 13 to 15 points right now, that just doesn't bode well for Republicans. As you point out, these are natural cycles that happen in politics. So Democrats need to be careful. Don't be insulting. I don't want to hear the word deplorable on national television or even in private at a fundraiser, because someone is always videotaping you. Be careful in how you're speaking about the masses of Americans and those who voted for Donald Trump, who he's at 35% approval. Some of those voters, we can pick them off if we are careful and thoughtful.
I think we just gave you 30 seconds of free time for candidate school. Lisa, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I do think Democrats did themselves a disservice with just this crazy rhetoric we saw over the tax reform debate. Look, the Wall Street Journal had a poll out not that long ago where only 17% of Americans think they're getting a tax cut, when in reality, even liberal groups are saying it's at least 80%. So that's a lot of room for Republicans to change that voter opinion heading into 2018. So I think when you have 80% of Americans realizing that they are in fact going to get a tax cut, that they're going to have more take-home pay, I think those numbers change, and that does certainly benefit Republicans heading into the 2018 midterm elections.
But the cut doesn't come into effect until next year, so you're going to see the little bump and certainly the bonuses.
No, but I'm talking about voter opinion and changing that messaging, getting that messaging out, and then letting voters know that what they've been hearing from the national media simply isn't true. That this isn't just for the rich. This isn't just for. No, they're not. Listen, turn to other networks, read other publications. That's simply not the case. That message is not getting to voters.
No. I'm saying that you can hear a message all the time, but until your bank account goes up, you're not going to feel it personally. Democrats, I believe, are much better messengers on this, and I don't think you would disagree certainly about what's gone on the tax bill. So